Well, no, go ahead, do it. I'm gonna just tweet it out and.
Perfect. All right, we're live. We are live. Hello, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to Legal Bites, another edition of the Lawyer Spot. A nice little tradition, which I've managed to corner into my channel. And Nate is wonderful for joining me pretty much every week now. And talking about some of the most interesting stuff going on with the law. So today we are talking about the U.S. Women's National Team because they are in the news again, having to do with their next contract, which they are trying to negotiate. Then we've got again, Olympics. We've got women's gymnastics, the claims against Larry Nassar for sexual abuse over the years, and now actually they just testified yesterday to the Senate about the FBI's failure to investigate, and also some allegations about the poor reporting by the FBI, we should say. Then finally, we'll wrap it up with ACB, Amy Coney Barrett, some remarks that she made last weekend. So anyway, how are you, Nate?
I've been doing well, and just sometimes you get into that, like we were just talking about the YouTube writer's block, and sometimes that affects you because it's like I know what I want to say, and you have a plan, but it's like Mike Tyson says, and everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. So
I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, no, I've been dealing with a lot of the same too. So. It's which is one of the reasons why it's nice to have these regular live streams, because it's like you can talk through some stuff with other people, another YouTuber, and then also people in the chat having some good discussions. So it kind of helps to sort of open that stuff up when you get too locked up into analysis paralysis, which unfortunately happens to me all too often.
I hear you 100%. But again, it's a good thing, because I think the crowd, most of the people who watch us, know that that we are painstakingly trying to get things right. You know what I'm saying? We're just not trying to do it just to do it. We're trying to get things right. So
yeah. I hope people understand that. For sure. So, but hey, hello to people in the chat. KM, good morning. So yeah, I guess apparently we're going head to head against Steven Crowder. Had no idea. Lauren Myers. Live? I guess so. Yeah. Oh, wow. Lauren Myers, good morning. So driving to work, so you're just listening. Thank you for listening in on your drive. And nobody, thank you for your heart. So let's get started. This was it just kind of snuck into the press this week, right? The U.S. Women's National Team, the fact that U.S. Soccer is trying to negotiate with both the women's team and the men's team, because the women's team, their contract is set to expire at the end of this year, I believe, and the men's team, they're still operating off of their contract that expired, I think, in 2019. Which is really unfortunate for them, because they have no guaranteed salary and they have not been playing any games throughout this pandemic. Yeah. So, but yeah. So Nate, take it away. You're the women's soccer expert.
That's true. Right? I've narrowed myself into women's. It's funny because now on all my videos, I see you have to update us. You have to update us. So that update is coming. I'm sorry, my camera's just going in and out, but I got to turn off the I mean, if I can do that, I got to turn off the
autofocus,
aperture.
I guess.
Yeah, well, the aperture, because they have the aperture that darkens and lights it. So I think that's the problem that's giving me, and autofocus. But so just so everybody understands what's going on, I don't know. I do want to say this. When I started covering this story, I remember the reason why I even covered this in the first place, and I'll break everybody in. It was Kurt on civil law. The story had popped up about the case, I think in 2019, and we read the ruling. Now, before I read the ruling, I was 110% women's soccer, Team USA, equal pay. I was one of the people out there screaming, equal pay, this is ridiculous. They're winning. They should give them equal money. All this other stuff didn't matter. I didn't know any of the details, but I was invested and them getting equal pay, because it's an easy story to sell, right? They're women, they're winning, and they're not getting paid like the men. Does that make sense, Alita? It's
yeah.
it's it pulls on the heartstrings.
It does. It does. I mean, especially when you have a team that says, hey, we went and we won everything. We got everything that we possibly could. We did absolutely everything that anyone could have asked us to do. And then they were like, well, but we didn't get paid that we would have been paid if we had been men. And so therefore we're entitled to more.
And that's what happens with propaganda instead of news. See, propaganda, you narrow it to make it easy for people to understand, but hard to untangle. So easy to understand. We won the World Cup. We got paid $2 million. They get paid $40 million if they win. Discrimination, right? Very easy to understand. Very easy. And then the talking point is just scream equal pay.
Right. Easy to understand. And I would say also easy to share. Right.
Yes.
Because it's like if it's a tiny little bite that you can replicate over and over again, it's like an earworm that you get into people's heads, and then they're like, oh, I mean, equal pay, equul pay, equal pay.
It's obvious, right?
Yeah.
So reading through the case, I felt fooled. I felt like an idiot. I was like, my God, I didn't know any of these details, right? They actually got paid more than the men. What the hell? It just was like, I can't believe all these details were hidden from me. And these were from sources that I trusted. I trusted, CBS. This was on ABC. Good Morning. I'm watching Good Morning America before going to work. And I'm like, oh, they're laying out all the facts. They weren't laying out all the facts. They were actually lying. They were not lying, but they were misrepresenting the facts in a propagandist way, right? It was more propaganda than anything else. Mm-hmm. So with that said, it was kind of like, all right, now that I know the details, let me put out these videos. And I've always felt that with the women's national team, I've never been against them getting paid what they deserve to get paid. I've just been against them manipulating the situation in this PR thing to make people think that something was going on that was not. Number one, they are not being paid unequally. Number two, the whole story that they've been telling is false and inaccurate. And number three, when people finally understand the details, they're shocked. And that's why that video did so well. The video that when I broke down, because when I initially broke it down, I was like, you know what? Let me break it down. And this is like I always say for my kids to understand. So I went and broke it down for my kids to understand. And I remember making the PowerPoint presentation, and I told my daughter, do you understand this? And she was like, no. So now I throw that slide out, I put another slide in. I'm like, do you understand this one? Yeah, Daddy, that's easy to understand. So I'm like, if you can understand it, I know people can understand it. And and then 4 million views later, it was like, oh my God, people did understand it. So now that brings us to the day. So what's been going on? So US soccer was in a quandary. And the quandary is they have two teams. Let's take gender out. And let's say the men's team let's say one team goes and wins a tournament. And the prize money for that tournament is $100 million. So US soccer says, we're going to give you a percentage of that prize money you bring in. We'll give you $50 million out of $100 million you brought in. And then you have this second team. I'll call them Team Alpha. And this second team goes and plays in a tournament. But they've won that tournament, and that tournament only pays $2 million. So US soccer pays them a percentage of that $2 million. That's essentially what's going on here. And FIFA's the one who dictates how much money they get. Now, the men's game is obviously more profitable, and the women's game is getting there, but it's just not at the level of the men's soccer brought in $6 billion for the World Cup, while the women's soccer brought in like $100 million or $200 million. So it's a huge discrepancy. So essentially, and Alita knows this, the women's national team was essentially asking to be paid more and to be paid as if they won the men's tournament, right? That's essentially what they're asking for. Pay us as if we won the men's tournament, and give us the prize money as if we won the men's tournament. So that's essentially what they were asking for. Now, the judge threw out the lawsuit. He said it was BS because, obviously the facts were what they were. They got paid more than the men. They got paid, they got paid when the men didn't get paid anything last year during the pandemic. They got paid zero, and the women still got paid a full salary, full benefits, and everything. Right. So it's been totally exposed to travesty. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and the thing that got me about the women's argument is that they weren't saying pay us as if we had the men's contract. They were saying pay us as if we had the men's bonuses from their contract.
Yes.
For the World
Very
Cup.
important distinction. Yes.
And it's because it's like, that's, the basic foundation is very different between the two. And the reason why the men have a much higher ceiling for what they can earn is because there's so much risk. And so the women, of course, they wanted to eliminate the risk in having a salary and benefits and, maternity leave and childcare, traveling childcare, and all of these great benefits that they wanted, which they successfully negotiated for. But in order to be able to afford that, then they had to put a little bit of a ceiling on what they would get as a result. And also there was also an external ceiling on what they would get for bonuses for the Women's World Cup, because of the fact that FIFA only pays a certain amount. And that is what is different between the two, which is what you were getting at between the two different tournaments.
And one thing I think a lot of people just don't realize about this also too, is that the women took guaranteed money over risk. The men said, we don't want any guaranteed money, right? We want the risk of number one, the risk that the men took were, we hope that you play a game, right? Because US Soccer wasn't even mandated to hold games for the men. We hope that you play a game. And if we do play in the game, we hope, right, that game that we'd win, so we get paid. So the men's their structure was, hopefully US Soccer would have games that they can play in, and they would get paid only if they played in those games. That was it.
Right.
No benefits, no anything else. Just it was literally, they were guns for hire. I like to call the men's team guns for hire. You come in and we cut you a check if you play. If you don't play, good luck. You get your money elsewhere. But the women's team wasn't like that. They were paid employees, $100,000 a year paid employees. So over the 4 years of the contract, each woman who was under contract got $400,000. Right? That's what they got. The men would get zero, while the women get $400,000 per person for over those 4 years. And let's not forget about the full benefits package, and all that other stuff. So that's essentially what we were talking about. So what recently happened? Well, the men's national team thought it would be a very good idea to support the women's national team in this endeavor. So they filed a case brief when after the women's national team lost their equal pay claim at the lower court. They appealed. So the men's national team filed a amicus brief. Now, what that means is that it's a friend of the court, right? We're supporting this side. And in their support for the women's national team, they said they support equal pay. Fine, right? So US Soccer was like, you know what? We're going to stop with the nonsense. Let's just stop with the nonsense, right? So we're going to do this. We're going to offer both of you guys the exact same contract, because US Soccer was literally put in a position, and get this, people, you guys really have to understand this. The women's soccer team's main argument was that if we were paid under the men's deal, we would have made $60 million more. That was the crux of their argument. But the court found, as a matter of fact, so what I'm telling you is a factual matter. This is the facts of the case, is that if the men were under the women's deal, they would have actually made more too. So US Soccer was in a position where the men's team could sue them for discrimination, but also the women's team could sue them for discrimination, because they both had separate contracts, and both their contracts happened to work out good for US Soccer, but work out bad for the women and men's team. So that's essentially what happened. So US Soccer was like, all right, we're going to cut all the games. We're just going to offer one contract for both teams. And in that contract, the men, if you go and win the World Cup, which is unlikely to happen, but if you go win the World Cup and make $100 million bonus, and the women, you go win the World Cup and make your $2 million in prize money, we're going to combine that and then split it 50-50. That's exactly what so that's the offer they're putting out. Yeah. We're going to combine that money and split it 50-50 and give you both equal pay. Since the men, you can't keep your mouth shut, and you want them to be paid equally, and you want to be paid like the men, we're going to do that. So, but guess what happens? The men have a problem with it.
Well, nobody likes it, right?
Yes,
Neither side wants it.
Yes. So,
they finally get what they want, and it's not what they want.
So but it's so crazy, because let me share this. I'm going to share the tweets, because so I've been looking at it, and we can look at the tweets. It's hilarious.
Let's do it.
It's literally hilarious what's going on. So it was announced by US Soccer, and everybody was like, "Oh my God, this is so great!" Right?
Yeah.
So the fans were like, "Oh my God, this is so great! Equal pay, we've won! We've won! We've won!" But not really, right? So here it is. So let me screen share these tweets. So when first asked, the U.S. women's national team was like, "Well, we don't really know what's going on here. We don't know if we're really going to like this, that type of thing."
Mm-hmm.
Let me pull this up. Is this here? Yeah. I got boop. All right. So first, let me go here. So this is the announcement. U.S. Soccer offers women's national team its identical contract proposals, right? Boom, 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 boom. Likes, retweets. So then, if you look at the retweets, if you look at the
quote tweets.
Yes. So here it is. First, yes, right? These are all their supporters. Yes. Progress. That's the U.S. women's national team. About effing time, right? Boom. Everybody's happy. This is a big story. Deserves. Yes. Rapido, the rest of the team, they did it. They won, right? They got it. U.S. But here's the U.S. women's national team. Now, at first, they did not respond, right? They were like, no comment, no comment. So they're like, no comment. You've just won. You've just got equal pay. What do you mean no comment? You say yes to the deal, right? Yes. Yes.
Say yes to the dress.
Sorry,
I couldn't help myself.
Yes. So they didn't say yes. So here's their official statement in response. The U.S. Soccer Federation's PR stunt and bargaining through the media will not bring us any closer to a fair agreement. Mind you, they got a documentary where the whole thing is negotiating in public. Their whole case was negotiating in public, right? Equal pay. That's how we know all the details.
Yeah. LFG was probably just a massive PR stunt.
Yes. In contrast, right, we are committed to bargaining in good faith to achieve equal pay and the safest working conditions. The proposal made by the United States Soccer Federation made recently to us does neither. So they are not happy, even though all the fans are happy. Everybody else is happy.
And the thing is that they just generically disagree.
Yes.
It's almost like they were like, what do we say? I don't think we like this deal. I don't think we like this deal, but I don't think I want to say exactly why. So let's just say this is bad, generic. and then we need to keep negotiating. We need to keep fighting.
Yes. Just keep on fighting. So now let's look at some of the quote retweets. It's funny because people are starting to get confused. Get a grip of yourself. You've been begging about equal pay for so long, despite neither bringing in as much revenue. So people are like, we're confused. You've been saying you want equal pay, but what's going on? Here it is, right?
Yeah.
So the U.S. Soccer responds to this. Let me try to find. I'll find U.S. Soccer's retweet because U.S. Soccer then retweeted this. Let me see. I even retweeted it. Oh, here's U.S. Soccer. So U.S. Soccer comes out and they says an offer on paper of identical contracts to the men, women, and men's national team, and to discuss equalizing prize money is real, authentic, and in good faith. A publicity stunt is a 90-minute one-sided movie. Shade.
Yikes. And also, which had quite a few factual, I should say, imperfections. Because I remember some of the things that they stated in there were definitely not what the court found with documentary evidence.
Oh yeah. They were playing the game. They were playing the game. And hey, you know what? I don't knock anybody's hustle. You know me. I don't knock anybody's hustle. But
true.
If you can't pull a wool over, you can't pee on me and tell me it's raining, right? You gotta let me know what's going on. Let's look at some of these quote retweets. Now the U.S. Soccer. So this gets posted when they are promoting a game today. So I'm assuming we're gonna have fireworks, right? Because it's just like if you are offering them exactly what they want, then I don't know. What more can U.S. Soccer do? Right?
It almost reminds me of a dog chasing cars.
Yeah,
it's like, the quote from Dark Knight, right? Heath Ledger's Joker, when he's just like, I'm like a dog chasing cars. I wouldn't know what to do if I caught one. It's like they've caught it and they don't know what to do with it. That's what it seems like anyway.
Everybody's hating on U.S. Soccer for being so unprofessional, but U.S. Soccer is saying the same thing that they're saying. So now U.S. Soccer's got to be professional. The women's soccer team, they can say whatever they want. It's crazy. But at the end of the day, one thing is true. They have been officially, because remember they were saying in the thing that they weren't really offered equal pay. They didn't really, the judge was wrong. So the U.S. Soccer said, you know what? F it. Here it is. Equal pay.
Yeah. No one can argue now. We have offered the exact same contract. Yeah.
But it goes farther than that. Just to be clear, it goes farther than that. Let me go to let me change this to ESPN identical contract proposal. So this is where
hey, Kurt.
It's going. Kurt's in the house.
How's it going?
What's up?
Good. How are you? So did you hear about the U.S. Soccer Federation offering the same contract to both teams in negotiation?
I heard some rumors along those effects, and I also heard about women's soccer not being happy. It surprised me, right? Whoa. I didn't see that one coming.
Yeah.
So check this out. This is the killer of it. Let me make sure I'm sharing the right screen. All right. So not only were they unhappy, it was the men's national team. Where's I'm looking for the quote? I don't think I can find it. So they're talking about it here, but essentially the men's national team seems to have woken up because they're saying like, "Yo, I don't know if this is a good idea for us because if we win $100 million and they win in $2 million, why the hell are we want to give up $48 million to them?" That don't make no sense.
The men finally used their brain parts because they came out long ago and said, "Yeah, we're totally in favor of equal pay." I'm like, "No, you're not." Yeah, they finally figured out, no, they're not. Wow, geez, I only got there ahead of them, like 2 years ahead of them, and I have no interest in it. Amazing.
Although, I mean, an argument can be made, however, that the men would probably benefit more under a shared pot deal like this than the women would, because the women actually have a history of winning the damn thing. The men are barely qualifying, if they're even qualifying in the first place.
And I think that's the rub too, because let's say if the men don't make it to the World Cup and the women go and win it, they got to share that. They got to share that money too.
That means
the women are like,
their efforts are now feeding the men, literally.
And what about the benefits? Because now if the men want benefits, now the men don't want benefits. Right? Why do we need benefits?
Because they get them from their professional teams, most likely.
So right? So it's like, so why are we giving you guys benefits? So all that now has to be worked out.
Yeah.
You just throw the men's team and the women's team's negotiator in a room and let us know when you come out with an agreement, and then we'll talk. Well,
U.S. Soccer has come out with a statement, and the statement is that they will not be negotiating unless they equalize. Here it is. More critically, U.S. Soccer Federation in a statement said that it will not agree to a CBA with either union that does not take the important step of equalizing FIFA World Cup prize money.
How are you going to do that? Because they're the ones who are making it an issue. So FIFA saying, so U.S. Soccer saying, you guys figure it out. And the issue is, and that's been the sticking point. So it's saying, you know what? Since the men are saying they should be paid equally based on FIFA prize money, and the women are saying it, we are not going to negotiate unless both of you equalize the money. And if you don't, then it's just not going to happen. We are not going to put ourselves in a situation. So now the men are saying that FIFA is making them look like the bad guys. Yeah, because you made them look like the bad guys. They're not stupid. They just threw it back at you. Okay, give up your prize money. And think about this also too. If the men's team just qualifies for the World Cup, they make more than the women if they win it. So just qualifying for the World Cup for the men gets them more money. Yeah, that's what the men are afraid of. If they win 2 games in the World Cup, they would have tripled what the women make if they win it. That's the crazy part about it.
The harder I work, the more I have to pay the other guy, right? So this is just full-blown communism.
A great unifier for the whole team.
Meanwhile, the end of soccer in the United States coming in 3, 2, 1.
So you're not hearing this on the mainstream media. You're not going to be hearing this anywhere. And why? Because they are still wanting to push the equal pay story, and that's fine. But the truth of the matter is
They were offered equal pay before. They said they were offered equal pay before. Nobody believed them. Matter of fact, they called us liars. We even played the tape of the team members saying they offered it to us and we rejected it.
We also played the tape, although we had to cut it out for copyright reasons, apparently, of them saying that the success shouldn't be a factor in the pay. Success shouldn't be a factor. It's equal pay for equal work. Whether or not we're successful in playing shouldn't be a success. Oh, wait a second. We won more games. We should be rewarded.
That's the definition of a bonus compensation structure, right? Like you only get bonuses if you do something extra, that earns it, right? Just like somebody who in sales, in order to get bonuses, they have to reach certain metrics of actually selling.
It's all sex-based discrimination somehow. I keep pointing out, like, pick any other major sports team of your choice, like the NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball. They're all men's teams. Not all the teams are paid the same. Not all the players are paid the same. It's obviously not because of sexism. It's probably because of economics.
It's a value-based
teams bringing the same revenue, right? Not all teams are equally good. Not all players are equally good.
Not all regions want to pay as much to go to games. Like looking at the Oakland A's versus the LA Dodgers. Oakland A's versus San Francisco Giants. They're like right across the bay, right?
All the NFL teams should be paid exactly the same, regardless of how well they do in their season, or how well they do in the playoffs, or how well they do in the Pro Bowl or the other Super Bowl or anything like that. They should be all paid the same. I'm sure all the men are down for that.
But think about this. Think about the Tom Brady. 8 Super Bowls, right? 10 Super Bowl appearances, the greatest quarterback of all time. And Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston, a guy who can't get off the bench. He's saying, I should be paid as much as Tom Brady. We do the same job, right? Why should we get the same? Yeah, why should we get the same pay? Even though you suck and you can't win a game, but you should be paid as much as Tom Brady. That's essentially what they're saying. And again, it's a value proposition with sports.
As long as we're at it, I should be paid the same as Tom Brady.
Yeah.
I haven't retired from the NFL yet.
It was like, I think we were talking about this last night about the Wu-Tang album. They put an album, they cut it, and they didn't release it, right? People are paying $2 million for that. I could do the same thing, and nobody's going to pay a dime for it, right? Because it's a value proposition. What are people willing to pay for the product? And that's what the men's national team. So right now, we'll see how it plays out. But as of right now, the women's national team are not, there's no celebrations about equal pay. The men's national team, there's absolutely no celebrations. All horror and disdain, because we got what we wanted. And that's not what we want. We wanted $66 million. We didn't
make the women go out there and publicly say, yeah, we don't want equal pay. Make them say it. Make them say it from their own mouths.
But they don't want to say that. They want to say what they just said. This is.
They want basically what it is they want a different version of equal pay.
Yeah.
It's right, which is not equal pay.
Yeah, it's like those two thoughts don't really go together in the same sentence. But okay.
It's a variant, if you will, of equal pay. It's not exactly the same thing. It's
all
like another
animals
Loki.
are equal, but some are more equal than others. Is that what we're doing?
That's kind of what it sounds like, doesn't it?
Kind of sounds like, yeah. Oh my God.
Man, so yeah, so that's a fun topic. We'll see where those negotiations go. But that was a very smart move by the U.S. Soccer Federation. I'm not going to lie, by making all of that very public and by saying, hey, look,
equal
the
pay.
thing you accuse us of not doing, we just did.
We're waiting for the men and women's signature anytime. Here's the deal.
But you know what?
Yay.
It was a masterstroke. Let's just call it what it was. It was a masterstroke. It was just like, you know what? Okay, you want equal pay? We'll give it to you. Here it is. And now they're panicking. Oh my God! It was whoever came up with that idea was like, yo, let's just offer them the exact same deal. They should get a bonus right now, because it exposes the fraud. It literally exposes it to everybody. This is not about equal pay. So
we'll give it to you retroactively. By the way, we're also going to need you to cut us a check, because you shouldn't have gotten as much money as you did.
And the pandemic was the best thing to happen for U.S. soccer.
Oh yeah,
because the men got paid absolutely nothing last year.
Yeah, that was a nice savings for. Although maybe though, because they also weren't getting revenue in, right? Because they didn't have games.
Neither were the women. Neither
Oh,
were
that's
the
true.
women.
That's
Remember,
fair.
nobody
fair.
had the games.
Under these specific contract terms, you're right. That was a major savings for U.S. soccer. That's right. That's a very good point.
Nobody bought. There was no revenue being brought in.
Oh man. So, sticking with the Olympics and Olympic women's sports, and moving on to another sport specifically. Let's go to gymnastics. What was that?
One thing, somebody asked if we watched LFG. I did watch
LFG.
Yeah. It's propaganda 101. It's just propaganda.
I almost wanted to do a lawyer reacts to LFG after watching it. I almost wanted to, because there were so many. I found myself just like kind of like yelling at the TV
Do it.
when I was on the couch with my husband. I was like, it's almost like I need someone to hear this.
It's
so
like
maybe I will. I don't know. I'll think about that.
Somebody else asked, what's LFG? LFG is the documentary from the women's national soccer team about their equal pay. Somebody asked above about if we had watched it.
Yeah.
But somebody else was
whining and
asking.
crying for 2 hours.
Yeah, but it's funny because when they lost, and I love how their lawyer was so he was using his words so loyally. It was so great. He was saying the judge said that we lost because some of the women got paid more than some of the men. I'm like, he didn't say that. It was very specific. The women's national team got paid more than the men. He didn't say some of the women versus some of the men. He was very specific. If you read what he said. You don't have to.
You got to read the words on the page.
Yeah. No. Dude, like he's making it seem like one or two women got paid more than one or two men. But so I was like, all right, this is just straight propaganda.
Yeah, and that lawyer, I just was like, man, this guy's grifting.
Yeah,
he knows this is not a good case, and he's squeezing that lemon for all the juice that he can.
Michael
Avenatti is still barred. Let's get him on board. Why not?
It's on CNN. So some people are asking. It's on CNN. CNN played it. I don't know if you go to CNN. They played it live.
And CNN. It's also on HBO. That's where I saw it was on HBO Go or HBO Max, something like that. So anyway, but yeah, anything else on this before we move on?
No. I think it's some they were talking about LFG.
Yeah. No, that was good. So yesterday there were four women gymnasts who testified in front of the Senate to talk about the way in which the FBI bungled the investigation into their claims against Larry Nassar, the doctor for the US women's gymnastics team, who was charged, tried, and convicted of assaulting, I don't know how many women. I feel like it was in the hundreds from what I remember reading about.
Lots.
But it was like so many women that were adults and minors, and just like in some of those horrible ways, and the most vulnerable girls that are in a terrible age, and anyway, so now they had they testified in front of the Senate to talk about how they made their claims to the FBI, and the FBI did not investigate those claims, and then as a result, Larry Nassar was able to stay in his role for however long, much longer than what he should have after they made their claims, and then also one of them, Aly Raisman, or not Aly Raisman, that was McKayla Maroney, said that she later saw when she came across the investigative report that was drafted of her statements, that they were totally misrepresented. So there was some serious issues going on at the FBI as to what they're doing about this investigation. This is not something that's political in nature, and in fact, apparently there's like bipartisan support for looking into this issue. But I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on that. Because Nate, so I know that you've done investigations on this into those kinds of claims before, back when you were in one of your other 9 lives, as a cop, right?
Well, when I was in law enforcement, because there's specialized units. It's like there's a unit who investigates murder. There are units who investigate rapes, sexual assaults. So I wasn't in one of those units, but I did when I was a patrol officer. I did run into, like, I've had issues where somebody will come up and say, hey, this has happened to me, and then you'll have to investigate it. You turn it over to the people who are more qualified, because even questioning witnesses who've had that traumatic experience, you need specialized training, right? A beat cop can't question someone who's just going through a sexual assault, because there's certain things you have to say. There's certain things, you got. It's I don't want to say it's a strategy, but it's a technique that you use, because you want to make sure you let the victim know that things are important, but you also have to understand what questions to ask to get the right answers from people, so you can maintain evidence and be able to investigate it properly and get positive results. And at the DA's office, actually, I was in a unit because we dealt with prostitution. So there were a lot of sex crimes naturally in prostitution. If you go to a convenience store, if somebody steals a bag of chips, that's what they have to deal with. But with prostitutes, it's unfortunately sexual assaults, because that's how men steal from them. And if they don't pay, that they count as that. So when watching this particular thing, it's interesting that the FBI, I would not have suspected in 2015, because I remember when things changed here in New York for sexual assaults. And we had all this training, they trained, even because at one point I was a supervisor, I was a sergeant, and they trained us all, like, all right, you need to make sure you do this. If this happens, you got to make sure you do this with the victim, get them help. We have, mental health professionals who you can call to also get there. We don't want you to question them. Like, we don't want you to say things like say after they tell you their story, we don't want you to say something like, is that it? Something, you have to be able to understand how to communicate in that specific space. And right. I think the FBI, it's like nobody took any of that training in 2015. These women were not believed by the FBI. And it's weird, because in law enforcement, this believe all women thing in law enforcement, that's not how it works. The way it works in law enforcement is that you believe someone. If someone comes and says something happened to them, it could be anything. You believe them. I'll believe you as law enforcement. If I'm there and you come and say, this happened to me, I believe you. But I believe you, and then I go investigate to verify what you've told me, right? So that's the way it works. I believe what you're saying is true. I believe your account, and I'll go investigate it. And then if I start seeing things that don't add up, times of day, you were here, you were there, this, then, what evidence do you have to support these claims? That's when now, we go and investigate, and that's when things may change, right? So all initial complaints, we generally believe, but it's not, we just don't believe it blindly. We have to now prove it to district attorneys and even juries that what you said happened is true. And then it's not going to believe your word. We have to also back that up with facts. And a lot of times people just think that it's just that when, because I've been in situations where people have lied about sexual assaults, but the only way that was found out is that when the person first came in, believe them, take them to the hospital, do everything we have to do. But then when you go to that, to verify their stories, you find out that it was bogus. That's the way it happens. And I think now in our society, we've gotten to the point where it's like, you don't believe these women. No, that's wrong. Or it's believe the guy is automatically guilty of the assault. No, that's not the way it works either. There is this piece where you believe facts and evidence, and you try to see support claims. So I think here the FBI went the wrong way and was like, we're going to believe this doctor for the U.S. team is not assaulting anyone, and we're not going to believe these young women, and just and say, is that it? Is that all he did? He touched your leg? Is that really it? Not knowing that we had a serial predator in this case. So I know I said a lot, because it's very difficult when you have these type of cases, because it's such a specialized training that you have to do to be able to see, communicate with victims, and even investigate these crimes, because it's so personal. And a lot of these things happen in a one-on-one situation. A lot of these types of sexual assaults and things happen. Nobody's doing this out in the open. This is usually behind closed doors, two people, and those are really hard cases to try to figure out, because essentially a lot of these cases do come down to he said, she said, and those are some of the more harder cases to even prosecute, or even making an arrest for.
Right. And I think in this particular case also, it's like it was so many women and so many girls that I could understand someone looking at the allegations and looking at the sheer scope of the allegations and saying, that's just not possible. Like how it's almost like it's too big to believe, it's too horrific to believe. Because it's like, if you believe that could possibly have been happening for that long, then it's like, well, what else could possibly be happening that would go that wrong? And it starts to really kind of mess with people's heads. But, in this particular case, it turned out to be absolutely true.
It becomes a negative feedback loop, especially and I think this may have happened here, again, this is all speculation, but if you're an investigator and you've gotten 30 accusations and you haven't moved on it, and then eventually it starts becoming overwhelming, sometimes your professional credibility now is because your boss is going to be like, how only an idiot wouldn't have investigated, only an idiot. So now you have this kind of background thing where you're like, well, I don't want this to be true, right? Because my career depends on, if any other idiot would have seen it and I didn't see it, what does that say about me? That's why the other guy retired after when stuff started coming down. He was like, "Oh, I'm out of here. I'm retiring," and they couldn't get him, right? He was like, "What his boss they were able to get," and that sometimes happens when you're afraid to just say, "I made a mistake," and that's what eventually I think started happening. I think the FBI at one point was afraid to say, "We made a mistake," and those professionals were afraid of the consequences of about saying they made a mistake. They let this guy go. They let this guy victimize more people. What did that mean for their careers? But the guy who, the main guy who was doing it, he retired, and because he was smart enough to say, "This is not going to be good for my career."
Yeah, man. Kurt, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I don't really have anything super intelligent to say. I really enjoyed hearing what Nate had to say about the training experience that's relevant to this kind of investigation, and I think that there's also the point that was made that you get into this sort of confirmation bias of whatever it is you think initially. So, yeah, people make mistakes. The FBI made a mistake, and Larry Nassar sucks. So that's about what I think about that. A bold position.
Yeah. Very, very bold. But yeah. So anyway, I mean, that was just a topic that I wanted to at least touch on, because it was one of those that just felt like, I don't know, I wanted to talk about it. It upset me enough that this level of I don't know, incompetence, I guess, or lack of care, I guess, was taken at this level.
I guess the only other point worth making is that that for the FBI, it's often the case that their successes are private, their failures are public.
That's true.
They don't typically make a big deal of their successes, make the curtain calls. Now the U.S. attorney will, or whatever, but the FBI typically doesn't. So,
that's a fair point.
We can't say how successful the FBI is on the whole, and how abnormal this is, but it's probably more abnormal than not. Let me put it this way: if the FBI is knocking on my door, I'm going to crap my pants a little bit. So yeah.
Well, yeah, I just had a client that had that happen. It was just kind of.
I'm going to call you, Nate. Help.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
Help. Yeah. Listen. Also, this is a public service announcement. So you guys won't know who the client is, won't know anything about the guy, but I have a client who unfortunately got that knock.
Oh no.
And this person spoke, and I'm going to say, if anybody comes to you and starts asking you questions about things that seem to be crimes, right? Were you here at this time when this happened? The best thing to say is, I'm not going to answer any questions. You got to speak. Now, you may be totally innocent, but the fact that they are knocking on your door, asking for you by name, I want to speak to this guy, it's best not to speak to them in that moment. I'm just going to say it. I think you should get an attorney, and you should call somebody like me, and then I'm the one to speak for you. That this person didn't do that, so unfortunately, but you got to be smart with this, people.
Yeah. Yep.
Don't talk to the feds, especially the feds, because lying to them is a crime. So if you lie to them as you're talking to them, then you're going to get in trouble for that.
Michael Flynn. Flynn.
Yeah.
Well, so they say, but whatever. I don't think he lied, but that's a whole nother story.
It was a horrible exaggeration of the truth, not a lie.
So, but here's a question before we move on from the gymnasts. What can the committee do to help these gymnasts? Anything? I mean, I'm thinking. So the Larry Nassar is already in jail, right? Because he's been convicted of all of his crimes. I mean, I don't know if there's any sort of a lawsuit that could be had against the FBI for personal injury. I don't think so, right?
Sovereign immunity.
Just exactly.
Immunity, yeah.
Like unless there's some specific statute that says that gives citizens permission for that kind of a thing. I don't think so. So unfortunately, I mean, I think that the really the only thing that they can do is do what they just did and testify to the Senate and make their stories known so that there's some sort of political pressure to investigate the FBI to make sure it never happens again.
Just so people understand too, there was a case Gonzalez, who is it? Scalia wrote an amazing opinion about the case, where a young woman had was it a restraining order? No, order of protection against her
Castle
husband.
Rock versus Gonzalez, great case.
Castle Rock versus Gonzalez, and in that case, she had a restraining order. She took it to the cops. The husband was there, trying to make a mess, and they didn't arrest the husband on the restraining order. So she sued, saying that, hey, she had a restraining order and the police didn't do their job. It's essentially what happened with Larry Nassar. And the court came down and said, you don't have a right to police protection because of the finite resources, and that you couldn't sue the government for not protecting you. That thank God for our Second Amendment rights. But yeah, you can't sue the government if they don't protect you. So that would occur here too.
Exactly that. It was like when some of the gun control people was like, well, you should call the police. I'm like, okay, Castle Rock versus Gonzalez, Warren versus DC,
Warren versus DC,
Winnebago County. Those trifecta of cases. The police have no duty to protect you. Warren versus DC is even more of a horror show. Do you know Warren versus DC? Fact pattern off the top of your head? That's a bad one. It's even worse. DC.
I remember. Well, I know Gonzalez because Gonzalez was on my test. Warren versus DC. I remember. I think I remember the facts for Warren. Let me think.
Warren versus DC is bad. Yeah, Warren versus DC. I think it's 1976. Some women here. Some women are multiple women are living in a multi-floor house. So some living on one floor, some are living on a different floor. It's a shared housing accommodation in DC. They hear someone breaking in. They call the police. The police don't come.
Yeah.
They call the police again. The police do a drive-by, look. I think they might have come to the door and then left. So the women then escape through a window to the roof. They hear stuff downstairs. They think, oh, it's the police. They come back into the house. It's the bad guys. The bad guys then force them to mutually gratify each other for the next 12 hours. It's a horror show. And they can't sue. So yeah, fun times.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. They forced them into all kinds of unnatural acts. So good time.
There was something. Oh yeah, I remember the distinction with that case is because DC was federal, and I know some states actually allowed you to sue the state under their state laws, but DC, since it was federal, didn't have that. The person didn't have that They didn't have that protection.
I was just covering one on my channel recently from Maryland, from the Baltimore riots related to Freddie Gray, where the mayor said we're going to give them space to destroy. Remember that from a while back, anyways. But Maryland has a literally called a riot act, which requires the police to prevent riots, and so they're suing under Maryland state law to be able to recover for not protecting their businesses. So, but did they? Because I know here in New York, so everybody understands. So we don't get, because I don't want to lose people in the technical piece of it. What happens is that you can't sue the government essentially for torts. So if the government wrongs you in some way, they have sovereign immunity. So if generally like here in New York, the courts, the government allows you to sue them because they'll pass a statute to say, okay, you can sue for these specific things, and you can only get these specific amounts of money. It's not you can get billions of dollars from the government. You can only get a very limited amount of money, and it abrogates their own sovereign immunity. So what happens is in these cases is that even if the government violates the law, unless
there's some action that allows you to recover, then the government can just claim sovereign immunity. Now, generally, you get over this. Let's say, for instance, if the police violate your constitutional rights in some way. 1983 claims get out of this through an enforcement mechanism through the 14th Amendment. So the 14th Amendment allows the federal government to abrogate sovereign immunity in particular situations, but that's a limit. Those are very limited amount of cases. You'd hear a lot 1983 claims. You'll hear that a lot from us. We'll say it all the time, but that's a very limited abrogation of sovereign immunity. I feel like I'm teaching too much now.
No, I was going to say, and those are usually the cases where you've got, police brutality cases. Those are usually Section 1983 cases, aren't they?
Yes.
So, and fortunately or unfortunately, depending on what your opinion is on qualified immunity, a lot of those end up going away as well. So because it's may not have absolute immunity like the government itself, but qualified immunity, they usually do end up having, because of the way that the Supreme Court has developed its analysis of those kinds of issues.
Yeah, correct.
So, but speaking of the Supreme Court, we can talk about Justice Amy Coney Barrett. She had a speech last weekend in Kentucky, which I thought was really interesting because it seemed like it was responding to some of the heat that the Supreme Court has been getting after their decision not to put a stay on the new Texas Heartbeat Act law. So the new abortion law. And so I thought it was interesting because, she was talking about how she said that the Supreme Court is not comprised of a bunch of partisan hacks. And she sort of pointed to the media and to hot takes on Twitter and said that, the way in which Supreme Court opinions get reported is that the result gets reported. And so she said that the people that are talking about these cases end up judging these decisions and these opinions based on the end result rather than how we ended up getting there. And so she said that is really not the best way to analyze whether or not the Supreme Court did the right thing. So she said it leaves the reader to judge whether the court was right or wrong based on whether she liked the results of the decisions. She said, I make my decisions regardless of whether I like the result or not. She said, it's not my job. She said, it's not my job to decide cases based on the outcome I want. And I think that this was really interesting because this is something that we've kind of touched on before, that we talk about how, generally speaking, the law is supposed to be a means test, right? We're not supposed to just disregard the means that we take to get to a certain end. Whereas it seems like a lot of people sort of view the legal system as exactly that. They try to say that, this result is the just right, the just result, it's the moral result, it's the way that things should be, and so therefore it doesn't matter how we get there. I just want us to get there. So I thought this was really interesting because and she was talking about how the difference between I guess the Supreme Court and the rest of the governmental system is that she said that so the differences on the Supreme Court are judicial philosophies. They're not the same thing as political parties. So anyway, what are your guys' thoughts on that?
Well, I think it is a philosophy of result versus process is one of the huge things, and when you're trying to figure out how to do things. So at least from my mind, and maybe this is not a fair characterization, some might disagree with me, but it seems more left-leaning people and more left-leaning people on the court think more in terms of outcome. More right-leaning people on the court think in terms of process. So
I would agree. Yeah.
It seems to me that I see what to my mind seem like very inconsistent things from the left, like believe all women, but except maybe not this time, or not to this degree, or we're not going to believe that because it's politically inconvenient, or the AOC wearing a very expensive dress saying tax the rich at a gala that cost $30,000 a ticket, which seems okay. So, but we try to think more in terms of like principles and process, and it's like if we follow the process, the result will emerge. I mean, the Constitution is all process oriented. It doesn't really dictate results. It just says, here's a way to go about doing things. If you do this, probably good things will emerge in the end, we hope. So, yeah, I think that's fundamentally right. And I feel I feel like at least in this particular case, I feel like the minority decision had a process-based point, so I don't want to be overly critical on them. I think you could have reasonably gone the other way and said, look, this bill is basically the same logic reaches the opposite conclusion as well. This is a completely novel way of doing things. We've never seen anything quite like this. So let's put a stay on it while we try to figure it out, would be a logical conclusion of that, versus, well, we've never seen anything like this, so we don't know quite to do. Let's remand it for further proceedings. So I think either it makes rational sense from process, but I think that the ultimate point that she's making, that people judge things based on outcome, it's like, yeah, the decision gets completely lost. I was lamenting this with regards to HB 8 in particular, because I was lamenting, the women's health versus, and like looking at all the standing issues that are there, and just watching like late night comedians like Stephen Colbert just blow it away in a sentence. I'm like, it's a little bit more complex than that. So yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the way it always is, right? There's always the devil is in the details, as they say.
Yeah.
I don't know. The Supreme Court. All right. There's some cases where how everybody's going to vote if it comes down to it, right? It's like we know there's politics involved. To say that they're apolitical is just not. It's just ridiculous.
Not
right?
completely true.
Yeah. But I think to say that they're all political is also just as ridiculous, because the majority of their decisions are overwhelmingly one-sided, right? They have a whole, but most of their decisions are unanimous, so like 7-2, or not. Like the majority of times they're mostly all in agreement. It's just really on these hot button issues. So I think Kurt's point is that 99.9% of the time they are process driven, and they all are in agreement, left to right. So I do understand Justice Barrett's concerns, but I will also say this: there's no way in hell that the Texas law is constitutional if you just look at Planned Parenthood v. Casey. I'm talking about let's just be honest.
I don't know, man. I've taken some deeper dives. I'm less convinced.
I'm just saying there's no way on its face that that's not an undue burden based on the standard that the standard was viability. The standard is undue burden. And if you cap it at 6 weeks, you still have an unviable fetus at 8 weeks, and a woman can't have the right to choose. That is an undue burden. I just don't see how you can get around it. So just with that alone, I would at least say, well, I would have issued the stay. But I also understand the other side, and I don't think their argument is lunacy. The argument here is, yes, but essentially we're going to be making an advisory opinion because we don't really have any facts to make an opinion on. That's essentially what they're saying. There's just not enough facts here for us to derive whether there's a constitutional violation. How is this going to work in real world? You're saying the law is bad, but there's really no facts behind it. What about the regular people? So I understand that part. Not saying, well, we don't know if it's constitutional or not, because it hasn't been presented in a way where we can make an opinion without just pure speculation. I think that's a very, very reasoned and understandable position to take. But I don't think the decision that they made is enough to say, because generally when you're talking as a justice, or whenever you're in court, you definitely want to let the status quo hold until you figure things out. So if their argument was we don't know how things are happening, then let's hold the status quo until we figure everything out. But here you couldn't do that, because by holding the status quo, you couldn't get facts to develop whether it's constitutional or not. So it's like you got the chicken and the egg scenario. We want more facts, but if we issue the stay, then we can't get the facts that we need to actually make the constitutional determination. So it is more complicated, but I personally can see both sides. And that's one thing I always say. If you guys put me on the Supreme Court, which is probably never going to happen, but put me and Kirk on the Supreme Court, and you'll have two people on there. And even Alita, I'm sorry, Alita, I left you out, but you'll have people on there who will give you opinions that are against their political leanings. And I do it all the time. For instance, there was one case where it was totally good. I think Kurt was on one side, I was on the other side, and all the conservative, and it was against what I believed was right. But I still came out with the opposite legal opinion. And the reason why is because being a judge is about removing yourself from it and saying, what is the law now, and moving it. So if you put me on the Supreme Court, I will make rulings based on the law, purely on the law. But do I think the justices on the Supreme Court are not doing that? I think they are. I think, and I'll give people one example. What's his name? What was it? Gorsuch.
Yep.
Gorsuch.
I was thinking of him too.
On gay rights.
Yeah.
That was something that was
the employment decision, right?
Yes, that's probably one of the best decisions that I've read. And if you told me that he was going to come out that way, I would not have believed you. I would not have believed you.
I don't think anyone really guessed that he was going to write that opinion.
Yes, but the one thing that you have to admit is that after he wrote it, the reasoning was so good that you had to acquiesce. Okay, he got it right. Even Barnes, who hates Gorsuch, even said it was the VMI, for instance. I hate Scalia, but his opinion and his dissent in VMI and in Morrison were amazing dissents. They were
Morrison,
amazing.
Yeah, it's like just tell me more. Oh, yeah, Morrison.
Yes, it was. They were, and his dissents became the majority opinion. And think about this in Morrison, it was 8-1. He wasn't even going to write it. He was going to abstain. And he said, I'm writing it anyway and he was new on the court. So that's what I'm talking about. That's the way you move people. That's the way the law should be. And I think no matter who appointed these justices, I honestly have faith that they are trying to do the right thing. And if you agree with them or not, I'm probably going to agree with them less than I will than I'm going to disagree. But I do have faith that they're trying to do the right thing. And I think they do take too much crap from people who don't know what they're talking about, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I definitely, I 100% agree. I think just like anyone else, they are, they are capable of human failings that sometimes you make decisions that are less than the ideals that you want to be holding yourself up to. But I truly believe that everyone on that Supreme Court really does want to uphold those ideals.
Yeah. So one thing I do want to ask you guys before we have to get out of here is that there's a mass confusion about abortion in the sense of people think if the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, that makes abortion illegal all over the place. And that's just not accurate, right? The majority of states are still going to abortion is going to be legal. It's just some certain states it's not, and it's going to be really at the political whim of that state, right? So I just want to make sure that that's clear to people that if they overturn Roe v. Wade, that doesn't outlaw abortion. It just sends it back to the state and allows the states to determine which way they're going to go. Which I'm sympathetic to, but that we can have a whole 2-hour conversation about that.
A debate part 2 with good logic.
The mechanisms of SB 8 in Texas, though, are really interesting. And looking at, I've done 2 videos now on the USA versus Texas on SB 8, and looking at the United States Attorney General's case against them, and looking at some of the arguments that are available. It should be really interesting to see. I mean, the district court's obviously going to issue the temporary restraining order. It'll be interesting to see what the Fifth Circuit does because of some of the procedural mechanisms in there. But it's going to be a really interesting case to continue to follow.
But how do you get over the fact, because essentially they've deputized everybody, right? They're deputizing. There's 2 issues that I think you got here. How do you get over the third party standing issue? Because that's essentially what they did. They're giving everyone third party standing. So those of you who don't know how expansive the law is, if you actually go look it up, let's say I'm an Uber driver and a woman gets in my car who's pregnant and I drive her to a hospital, right? I don't know what they're doing, right? I drive her to the hospital. She gets to the hospital, goes and has a Smith's Morrison. I can be sued for aiding and abetting, and the mental state. They don't have a mental state requirement there, so I could be sued now. I can be the most anti-abortion person on the planet who happens to drive Uber and happen to have driven this woman to a hospital and not knowing that she was going to get this procedure. I can be sued for $10,000 for aiding and abetting an abortion.
Right.
I think that's ridiculous.
I think that's absolutely insane, because that's also going to that has the possibility of leading to Uber drivers and whatnot discriminating against pregnant women, because they're like, I don't want to take that risk. I don't know where you're going. What if?
Well, strictly speaking, under the law, it has to be knowingly, but yeah, your point is still taken.
Well, but that doesn't mean that they can't be sued and then in discovery find out, oh, it wasn't knowingly. Like it's like the person is already spending money on defense, and by the way, they don't get their attorney's fees paid if they're defending against a lawsuit.
Fair point.
But
to answer Nate's standing question, the standing issue isn't under Article 3 because it's a matter of state law.
Yeah, correct.
State law standing. So the question is, can state grant the standing to random individuals? And I've pointed out before that this has been done, at least comparably. California has a Private Attorney General's Act, which which doesn't strip state level people of power. So the Attorney General and the district attorneys and stuff still have power. But also, private people can bring suits essentially in the name of the state of California for various violations. So the idea of giving the power to random people to enforce state law doesn't seem to be inherently problematic under a standing doctrine, as far as I can tell.
However, I would push back on that a little bit, though, because my understanding of the California power of attorney.
Private attorney general.
What's that?
I think it's private, not power.
Private. Oh my gosh. Yes. Thank you.
No
private attorneys. Yeah, that's why I was like,
California law better than she does. Booyah.
No. So the Private Attorneys General Act, I've actually litigated under this, so that's even more embarrassing. But no. So every time that I have had, a claim that I have filed on behalf of a client under PAGA, that has been something, it's something that we've added on to their other employment law claims against their employer. And it's something that they have their claim, and they are able to also bring it on behalf of other people. It acts as a lighter version of essentially like a class action. So class action light, because you don't have to prove as many elements like that you do for a normal class action case. So, but the initial plaintiff, though, that is actually filing it does have their own cognizable claim under any other law at the same time. And so that's the thing that I think is different here, is because other than this, this type of like handing someone, just a random person off the street, you could be a bum with no home and have this claim against some random woman that lives across town that you've never met. You don't know them. You've never interacted with them.
So here's an opportunity for you to correct my understanding on California law, because I was under the impression that one of the major ways that this Private Attorney General Act was used was by essentially randos trying to enforce California's Americans with Disability Act requirements, like all the requirements about, where the mirror must be, where the mirror has to be and where the handrails have to be and all sorts. So my understanding was random people would just drive around to random businesses and go into their bathroom and break out their rulers and measure things. And if they found a violation, they bring suit. So they had no cognizable injury, but they still saw a violation. So is that not a thing? Did I misunderstand?
I may have missed that. So I don't know. You may have something on that. But because
I'm trying to make claims about California law to a California lawyer, so I feel bad.
No, but I'm going to want to look that up now, because that was something that I otherwise had thought was a pretty material difference. So, but if that's not the case, then hello, hi. What?
Yeah, so you can text
food?
me and let me know which one of us was right.
Indy says hi, everyone. But what was I going to say? So I'm going to look that up to find out.
Okay. Yeah, so that if that is a difference, then that's a difference worth noting. And if it's not a difference, then I'll feel like I really won my law points today. So we'll find out, I guess.
So, well, anyway, on that note, I think we've covered everything. Is there anything else? Any last words from anyone other than Indy?
No, I'm just looking at this the Erica Jane story from the Real Housewives. For those of you who don't know, the lawyer who stole all the money from the women and children, the Aaron Brockovich attorney, stole all the money from the clients.
What a tool!
Spent it on his wife. But I didn't realize, because the wife is on the Real Housewives, the rich one, was Orange County or whatever.
Yeah.
But one thing I never realized is he met her in a strip club. She was a stripper.
Whoa.
Yeah. Did you ever realize that? She was a stripper, and he took her out to the strip club and, made him, But the same thing, remember, what was the other one's name who married the other stripper who married the big mogul in Texas? And it was like a big fight when he died. What was the name? Anna Nicole Smith. Anna Nicole Smith.
Didn't Richard Gere do that with Sandra Bullock?
That's right. Yeah, it became a movie, right?
Or that was Julia Roberts.
Julia Roberts. Yeah.
And she was not a stripper. She was a hooker.
Okay, that's true. We try to be nice here.
Sex work is sex work, right? Or something. I don't know.
I guess so. So.
Just imagine.
Yes, that's an interesting case. I know Emily D. Baker's been covering that like crazy. Yeah. But it sounds like a really, really interesting one to poke into.
I mean, this guy was so. I mean, the story again. It's almost like Nassar in some ways. It's too incredible to believe. Or Elizabeth Holmes, which is also a trial that's going on right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like, how did someone so effectively pull the wool off so many people's eyes to the tune of hundreds of girls assaulted in Nassar's case, or to millions and millions of dollars worth of clients in the case of Girardi, or billions of dollars and fooling some really high profile people in the case of Elizabeth Holmes.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell is this?
People want to believe the lie. I deal with it all the time. People really want to believe the lie.
You want to start a conspiracy? Who should we defraud?
No, it's unfortunately it's easy to do, because if you get people who don't want to listen to the reason, they don't want to look at the facts, they don't want to look. All of these cases, people had to turn away. People were dealing with facts and turn. Girardi, for instance, everyone knew that his clients were getting paid. His clients knew, but they turned a blind eye to it. It's like, come on, I can't pay my bills, but I got $100 million settlement. What the hell's going on, right? He didn't make a phone call. You know what I'm saying? So it's people don't want to believe people want to believe the lie. He's a good attorney. He's going to pay me my money. 10 years later, there is no money. It's sad, but people have to wake up earlier to know that they are being scammed.
I guess.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. Oof. Well, this is a pretty good stream. So next week we're going to see if something, because this was actually a really interesting week in the law. We had so many things happen. Yeah. It's been crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens next week. I don't know how long the Theranos trial is going to be going on, but I think probably for quite a bit, because that's some extensive wire fraud that they're talking about.
If there's any justice in this world, man, she gets convicted and gets maxed out.
I think that would be a very popular verdict.
Who did she steal from now? She just stole
everybody.
From
everyone, because they have wire fraud counts for not just the donors, like the very uber wealthy donors, but also the individual patients who paid for services that were supposed to be this brand new tech by Theranos, and it turns out it's like the average blood testing stuff that you can get off the street that's not proprietary.
Yeah.
So and also but it was like a poor version, because they had so many like blood tests gone wrong. And this is like people's health that people were trying to figure out if maybe they had cancer and like those kinds of issues, which is obviously it's horrible, because you're messing not just with their money, but also with their health. So
that's horrible. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, we will see. We're gonna watch it.
So, anywho, and I'm sure there's going to be some more fun stuff for next Thursday. So, on that note, thank you everyone for coming in, and thank you Nate, thank you Kurt for jumping in and chatting with me on these super fun topics. and yeah, we'll see everybody next week for our next live stream. Cool.
All
Bye.
Right.
Bye.